Hey everybody, Kevin here, and before we get into talking about where I've been for the last month and a half, I want to show you something here in Virginia. If you look right behind me at this cute little lake. Now if you'll notice, behind this fence and behind this wall, there is a large and quite nice body of water. In fact, this goes for a pretty good distance. All the way to where you can see the cars going to that little ramp up to that 4-lane. Now you hear of odd things happening with the ground opening up in other places. It happens a lot in Florida, is my understanding, a few other places around the country. You generally don't get that in Virginia down next to Tennessee. Kentucky has had times that the ground has opened up, once at the Corvette Museum a few years ago, once at an airport a couple of years back. But this is just kind of odd for this area. And the short story behind this, I've got to check on the exact year. I believe this was about 40 or so years back. The ground just basically opened up and swallowed all this, including a whole lot of construction equipment that is still sitting at the bottom of this. So they just walled it off and life goes on. And it's been this big, deep body of water ever since then. How you doing? Oh yeah, yeah. Okay. All right, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Now, granted, poor fella probably didn't realize that I'm a video star out here working, but he checked to see if I was broken down, so that was nice of him. As this swallowed up the ground that used to be here, for my subscribers may have wondered what swallowed me up the last month and a half. I can't tell you yet. Other than I've had a couple of things going on that are going to be good things for the long run. I'll be able to share those with you hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But I can't say anything yet. So we'll leave it at that for now, other than I'll try to get back to getting some videos up for you guys, especially concerning what you really want to see, which is stuff going on with these two vans, ways we fix them, ways we travel. And I have been on some short trips lately. But let's get to one of the things I can show you and talk about, which is something that went on with this Chevrolet minivan. The gold minivan you see in videos. This is going to apply to everything that GM made, which means there's some Buicks out there, Terrazas I think, there's these Chevy Ventures. There's the other Chevy minivan that came right after that. There's an Oldsmobile version of this, a Silhouette. So any of these are going to fall into having this same issue that I had to deal with on this one. So the short version of what has gone on with this minivan, because it was down a while and I kept taking trips in the larger white van, I spent a lot of time, me and a buddy, trying to chase down these problems. Because what started happening, and this is after I had 3 cross-country trips essentially in this van. I came back to my own town and I'm driving through town one day and it just dies while I'm driving down through town. Pull over the side of the road, start it back up, it's fine. This is happening like once a week as I'm driving it around. It would just die. One morning I go, run into Hardee's, come back out, I can't get the thing to start. So I come back, start looking up things it could be, because the fuel pump is working. You can hear it kicking on. So I went out, spent a couple hours changing a sensor, still couldn't get it to start. Called a tow truck, had it taken up to my buddy's house. We start replacing sensors, we start doing things, it's got all these things, it's throwing 0 engine codes, nothing to let you know what's going on. except it will just crank and crank and crank and not start. You have, I'm blanking on the name, you have the little square packs that actually fire the spark plugs on these newer cars. They're not firing. Hear the fuel pump coming on, getting fuel. Again, nothing to tell you what's going on. Start chasing this down, start looking on forums. People are griping about the fuel pumps. They have the fuel pump changed, and 3 days later, this happens again. There's different little issues going on. So I'm thinking I really don't want to go into the cost of having the gas tank dropped, which you have to do on these in order to change the fuel pump. So I'm trying to find every other possible solution. I have this at my buddy's house, and we're talking about different things. He's up there working on something. I reach under the van, unplug a wiring harness, reach in and hit the key, and it starts. And he's looking at me like, what did you do, man? It's like, I don't know. It's just something I read. So supposedly there was something that went on with this harness and the connector that would send a signal, and you could jump a wire and route it all around the vehicle to the battery. And then if this happened, you know, you could touch that to the battery and it would signal whatever and fix it. So we went through all that crap, run a jumper wire around here. And then, of course, I drove it for the next 3 weeks, and it never had another malfunction. Until it did. I went out to start it one day at the house. Again, nothing. Tried the little jumper thing we'd done. Nothing. So, having replaced about 5 sensors by this point, and knowing that the fuel pump is pumping fuel, so it's got to be something else, I order a wiring harness. I can't remember, maybe a 12-wire harness that goes under here. I sat there for a couple hours, cut all the wires, redid everything. Nothing. So at that point, I just gave up, let it sit, started traveling again, taking the big van, and I figured, well, if I can't figure this out, I'll junk this thing, just go buy another one. That's why I like cheap vehicles. I can just buy a similar one, throw everything into it, life goes on. But when I came back from this last trip in February, whenever it was, I decided, okay, what the heck? Let's just find out for sure. So I called a garage. They give me a quote I could live with. I hauled it out there. The guy changed the fuel pump. Back to normal. So after lots of research, here's what it is. And I know that you may not have and may never own one of these GM minivans. But especially as we're all out on the road and we're all trying to help each other, when we do run into problems, this is some good information, because you may run into somebody else that starts having some quirky problems out of their van or is stranded in their van and can't figure out what is going on. Because if the fuel pump is pumping fuel, and you can hear it when you hit the key, you hear it come on, you hear it synchronize. We took fuel lines loose. You could see it pumping plenty of fuel. But here is what is designed into these. When you hit the key and you engage the fuel pump only runs for a few seconds if you don't continue on and start the vehicle. That, I guess, is in case a fuel line comes loose or you have a leak, it's not pumping all the fuel all over your engine. Safety feature, I guess. But General Motors, in their wisdom, took this a step further. And somehow they are sensing the PSI, pressure per square inch. They're testing the pressure off of this fuel pump. And I don't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but if this falls outside of the range of about 42 PSI and 54 PSI, General Motors and the computer in here decides, that's not right. And it shuts down the coil packs. That's what I was trying to think of before. The coil packs that actually fire the spark plugs. And it doesn't let them fire. It lets your fuel pump continue to run, however. So it just sits there and cranks and cranks and cranks and won't start. Or if you're driving down the highway it'll just decide that the fuel pump fell outside of that range. Again, it will shut the coil packs down, and your vehicle dies and you drift off the side of the road. I don't know of any other vehicle that does this. I don't know why they did that to begin with. It's a complete and utter pain. And as these things get older and fell out of warranty and got a little age on them, I can't imagine how many of these were put into junkyards because people just couldn't solve the problem. And you know, when you go and buy parts, as we've discussed in other videos, there are some really crap quality parts, new parts, in stores. So I'm sure a lot of people went and paid the money and had the tank dropped, and they run down to Advance or whatever and bought their cheapo $150 Wong Fu brand fuel pump and dropped back in there, which worked for a while until it fell out of that designated range again. And then they started having the same problems, or kept having the same problems, until they gave up and just traded the vehicle off to some other sucker or junked it. So it is what it is. This thing is running like a new one now. It's a shame I had the problem that I had and had it down for as long as I did. And why I kept running into the issues of you guys wanting to see videos of both vans and me not having them in the same town at the same time, which has been resolved now, so that stuff is coming. But it's just one of those things you're going to have to deal with on the road. And again, if you've made it this far, this is good information to file away, because somewhere you're going to run into somebody in a campground, somewhere where you're out somewhere, that has one of these General Motors minivans that they're using as a camper, and they can't get it to start. And they don't know what the problem is. And their mechanic don't know what the problem is. And they're going to just start replacing parts, or worse yet, their mechanic's just going to start replacing parts. And they're going to replace everything but the fuel pump because the fuel pump's working. When in fact the fuel pump is the problem because of the way General Motors designed this and programmed this into the computer to shut the vehicle down. Again, if that fuel pump falls anywhere outside of a really small designated range. So that's the story with this. I hope that made sense. If you have any questions, feel free to put them down in the comments. If you've got some ideas of some other videos you want to see, put them down in the comments so I can kind of jig around and get the most important stuff out to you next. Like I say, I'm still going to be sporadic for the next couple of weeks because of things going on, but they've been good things, and then we'll get back on a normal schedule. I appreciate you watching. Hope everyone out there is doing well as everything in this country slowly starts to open back up. You know, don't sit at home and be depressed. Get out and do something. This has murdered, literally, some plans that I had for this year, or I would be sending you a video from Canada right now. That's not possible, so I've been doing smaller trips. I've been going to see friends in different places. We've gotten together, and you do what you can do. You know, a little bit closer to home maybe, but you do what you can do. We'll revamp on these other trips, and we'll get to the places we want to get to eventually, but we'll find some interesting stuff in between. See you next time.